they were smart to do it now because if his whole thing was, I want to be the highest paid non quarterback, they're going to be musical chairs at that this year, I suspect.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday, presented, of course, by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. You guys know that. We're learning today, not from Greg Cosell. He was on Wednesdays, Wisdom Wednesday, so check that out if you missed it today. It's my guy, Joel Corry. I think he's the best in the biz when it comes to the contract stuff, and there's a lot of contract stuff to get into. Then I'll give you my thoughts on the Tooney trade and the Zach Bond contract, Maxx Crosby contract, a lot of Seahawks news. There is a lot to get to on today's show. But first, we'll start with Joel, who's presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly.
The Big Show.
So I've said it for a long time, and I'll say it again. I think Joel Corry is the best guy out there, period, when it comes to really understanding contracts and understanding the language of contracts. One of my favorite pastimes is when somebody questions Joel on Twitter at Corey Joel, and he just annihilates them with the actual place in the rule book where it says what is really going on there. There's nobody better for this time of year than Joel. He's been my go-to guy for a long time. You guys know I don't follow that many people on Twitter X. You got to really be providing value for me, and Joel always has. There's a lot to get to, Joel. I guess, with some of the moves the last couple of days, I want to get to that because I think it's really interesting. And maybe even let's start with the Eagles, because I was a little bit surprised that they gave Saquon Barkley a new deal just 1 year into a 3-year deal. I know they'd extended A.J. Brown when he had several years left. I know teams are often concerned about precedent. Just curious to get your opinion on the logic and the deal that Saquon got and perhaps why the Eagles did that.
Yeah, I was a little surprised they did it as well because he's only played 1 year, albeit you could say it was the greatest running back season in NFL history. Um, they don't have to worry about the precedent because did it with A.J. Brown last year and he had 3 years left on his contract. And I think that was out of necessity because his original contract was a $25 million per year. And then you pay your number 2 receiver, Devonta Smith, $25 million per year. You're going to have to adjust it for the number 1 receiver. You could look at it this way, that there was a running back last year who was the best running back in 2023, who had 2 years left on his contract and got a new deal. Christian McCaffrey's extension averaged $19 million per year. So maybe that's what they were doing. McCaffrey had some injury concerns in the past. This year was hurt. Barkley's had injury concerns in the past. Hopefully they don't crop up again. All this has done to me is confirmed that Derrick Henry is extremely underpaid. He's in a contract year. I suspect the Ravens are going to address his contract before the regular season starts.
There is no question he is very underpaid, and they're going to have to do something there because he's only making $8 million a year.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't have the best running back season, but he might have had a top 10 running back season this past year.
Yeah, and then you've got Ramondre Stevenson, Hubbard, David Montgomery, James Conner. Since he signed, we've all gotten a higher average than his deal. So something's got to give.
No question. Speaking of extending guys, the Raiders did that with Maxx Crosby. They're making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. What's your thoughts on that deal, Joel?
Oh, I knew they were going to do something for him. He's been unhappy with his contract. Last year, they gave him a $6 million raise, where they added 5 million of new money and borrowed money from other years. So that was just a band-aid approach. He was instrumental in recruiting Christian Wilkins last year, and they paid Wilkins more. So like, hey, wait a minute, I'm the best player on this team. Something was going to get done. They were smart to do it now, because if his whole thing was I wanted to be the highest paid non-quarterback, they're going to be musical chairs at that this year, I suspect. The Bengals have already come out and said, Duke Tobin the other day, which for the life of me, why do you say this publicly? That's music to an agent's ear. Jamar Chase is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback. So Rocky Arsenault's like, thank you very much. Micah Parsons, provided David Mulligetta is allowed to do his job, he's going to want to be the highest paid non-quarterback. TJ Watt, he's in a contract year. His last deal made him the highest paid non-quarterback. Myles Garrett, wherever he plays, is probably going to need a new contract. He was the first $25 million per year non-quarterback. So we're going to see movement and probably musical chairs on who is the highest paid non-quarterback.
It's interesting. I don't understand, and maybe you can try to explain it. My initial thought when I saw this was the Cincinnati Bengals, because not only did you say publicly that Jamar Chase is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback, and now that just went up, but you also haven't signed Trey Hendrickson back. And so the price of really good edge rushers like Trey goes up. For the life of me, Joel, I don't understand why some of these teams wait as long as they do. I don't know what they think is going to happen, that maybe the player will suffer like a life-altering injury or career-altering injury, because these are still young guys that, T. Higgins and Chase and Hendrickson, they're not going to, you wouldn't think their production would drop off. Is there any logic to where the Bengals find themselves right now?
No, there isn't. They did go early with Burrow. They did his as soon as they could. He only played 3 years of the rookie contract, and they had the fifth-year option. They did try with Chase last year, so I'll give them a B minus for effort, because they could have been one of those teams like Dallas who didn't even attempt with Micah Parsons. One of the things they have to do is get into the 21st century of contract structure. They're one of three now. I guess it's now two teams. It used to be Pittsburgh, Green Bay, and Cincinnati that the only guaranteed money in a deal would be signing bonus, and they'd have these unsecured roster bonuses, March roster bonuses in year two and sometimes year three if the deal's big enough, for certain guys. Green Bay made an exception for Aaron Rodgers, and that's only in Jordan Love, the only two guys who have gotten traditional guarantees. Pittsburgh never did it for Ben Roethlisberger. They gave injury guarantees. They finally bit the bullet with TJ Watt, and then did it for Minka Fitzpatrick. Burrow was the first exception for Cincinnati. Given that Justin Jefferson has 110 million in guarantees and almost 89 fully guaranteed at signing, how are you going to say it's a Joe Burrow exception and not give the guarantees which other wide receivers have in their contracts? And then getting to Trey Hendrickson, part of this is his fault. He outperformed the contract almost immediately when he got there. And then a couple of years ago, he did a 1-year extension. So if he hadn't done the 1-year extension, he'd be free right now. But that being said, he's had 35 sacks in the past 2 years, led the NFL in sacks last year. Depending upon what metric, who's measuring it, he either led the league in quarterback pressures or was tied with Myles Garrett. So this screams over 30, and that's even before Maxx Crosby, to do an extension. I know he's a little older, he's 31, but he ain't slowing down. So I would think that you would want to take care of him sooner rather than later. He initially said, pay me or trade me. He's kind of walked that back a little bit, but I suspect this thing drags on, that trade me thing comes back up.
It's interesting because I didn't remember him doing that 1-year extension. And I don't know, I can't remember how much money they gave him, or
it was a 1-year extension for $21 million. It was for $21 million. It was a couple of years ago. and then he goes out and outperforms that. So sometimes if you outperform your contract and they're not going to take care of you the way you want to get taken care of, maybe you bite the bullet and then wait until your contract year. And you would think that's when they would want to extend you if they want you around. So he delayed getting paid a year. It's probably going to work out better for him because he got the extension, because the market's going to change. He's going to reap the benefit, even if he's not the highest paid guy, which I don't think he will be. We can't be, because Chase is going to be the highest paid guy on that team for a non-quarterback. But he's getting a rising tide lifts all boats, so he's going to end up doing better than he did than if he'd done it last year and hadn't done the extension.
Joel, I'm curious. I want to talk Dallas Cowboys. Now, I will say this. It seems like they got a really good deal with the Odighizuwa, and
Yes,
I don't understand why he would sign that. I don't like, maybe he really likes playing for the Cowboys or whatever. I'm confused by that one. And maybe let's just start with that, because he was going to get 25 million if they tagged him. He was going to be a hot commodity. He's getting 22 million in year one. I'm a little confused as to why he did that deal, Joel.
I am too, because the first thing I would look at as the agent is, okay, if I played on the tag of 25.133 million, what do I have to do to break even from what the offer on the table is? And we'll say the offer on the table is when he actually signed. So that's like 58.7 over 3 years. That's like what, 18.3 or 4 million. Just doing quick math in my head. So basically, you'd have to basically be in the 18 to 18.5 range after the season. I'm playing on the tag. I'm going to take my chances. Well, the thing is, the agent works for the client, not the other way around. You give your advice. If the client wants to do the deal against your objections, then he's the boss. But I would give my opinion in a very strong manner of why I don't think you should do this. But ultimately, he's the one driving the train. And I'll put it this way: I guarantee you, Don Yee was not in favor of Tom Brady giving hometown discounts, but he ended up doing them.
It's a really good point. Really good point. What about the Cowboys? Let's take a Odighizuwa out of it, right? Their propensity to wait as long as they possibly can to give out deals typically. And maybe you could argue this is that case. You know, with Dak, they have a huge cap number and he makes 10% more than any other quarterback. You know, with CD, we know what happened there. Now the Micah price just keeps going up. Is there logic you can think of, Joel, that makes sense? Is there some type of logic that you can think of as it relates to why the Cowboys handle contracts the way they do?
No, I can't think of one reason. If and that's not a cash poor team. If Dallas was a cash poor team, then maybe that could factor in the equation. It always costs the team less money to get a core good to great player signed as soon as possible. I'm going to put it into the Marcus Lawrence context for Dallas, that they put a franchise tag on him. He played out the franchise tag. If they'd signed him when they first gave him the franchise tag, he's not a $20 million per year guy. He signed for $21 million the next year when they stuck a second franchise tag. There weren't any $20 million per year non-quarterbacks when the July 15th deadline rolled around for him to do a long-term deal with the first franchise tag. So maybe he's at 18, maybe he's at 19. Then, right before the start of the regular season, you had Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald coming at 23.5 million per year and 22.5 million per year. I don't understand the logic behind that one. I don't understand the logic behind the whole way they've treated Dak Prescott, because that thing got run off the rails from the beginning when Jerry couldn't get it done, asking for a fifth year when you weren't giving up, quarterbacks weren't giving up a fifth year back then. And then he handed him so much leverage the first extension that it set the stage for this one. And I always thought he was going to get 60 million per year, whether you did it last March or you did it in September, because everything that transpired in the quarterback market wasn't going to be relevant, because it basically came down to, you gave me the hammer, you're going to have to give me my number to prevent me from getting to the open market, and you having 40.5 million in dead money from restructuring my contract 4 times.
It's wild. It really, really is. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Brock Purdy situation. That one is fascinating to me, Joel, because obviously he's done some really good things there. I think there's some debate as to what he would get on the open market. You know, there's people talking about maybe him taking less to stay with the Niners. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, one thing I'm going to say is, for anyone who's like, well, he should be thankful because they gave him a chance to start, because I've seen people say that, and that's why he should take less. No, I'm going to flip it on its head. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan should be thankful that he emerged after they gave up an arm and a leg to move up to get Trey Lance, who can't play. If Brock Purdy didn't come around, John Lynch is either back in the broadcast booth, or he's not, or Andrew Luck's not the Stanford GM, and John Lynch is. And your hot commodity offensive coordinator is Kyle Shanahan. That's really the way it should be looked at. Now, I've always thought as soon as Brock Purdy emerged, there's going to be one big problem in getting this deal done. What they did for Jimmy Garoppolo. They traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. He played 5 good games. I know he was in a contract year, and they made him the highest paid player in the league briefly. How are you going to make a guy who played 5 good games for you the highest paid player in the league, and then treat Brock Purdy, who has gotten you to an NFC championship game, and you almost won a Super Bowl, that was an overtime loss, with that guy? That, as soon as he started emerging, I'm like, that's going to be a big sticking point.
Wow. That's a really good point. I forgot about that. Really good point, Joel. I'll be curious. Did you think he'll top Dak over 60 million a year?
Well, here's what the Niners have to hope for. He's made like what 2.6, 2.7 in the first 3 years off of his rookie contract. Sometimes when you have a guy who's a late round pick or an undrafted guy, if you throw a big number out there, even if it isn't what he really should get, he might bite on it. Dak didn't do it because Dak was a 4th round pick, so it was the same principle, not quite to the same degree. The biggest risk Dak had was playing out that 4th year. He got hurt in his franchise tag year, so that wasn't so bad for him. And then they ended up paying him, but having the injury in the franchise tag year was totally different than having it in the 4th year of your rookie contract. So that could be the one thing that helps the Niners, that he hasn't made any real NFL money.
It's a really good point. It's why he's doing all those commercials that I've been noticing. Any predictions, Joel, for any of the free agent quarterbacks? I guess in particular, what Sam Darnold might command from a team?
That's the tough one. It's going to depend on how much weight those awful 2 games at the end of the season play with other teams. Because he was humming along, is like, man, this guy looks like he's a top 10 quarterback, and then it's like the clock struck 12 and Cinderella has a problem. But here's how I'd look at it for Sam Darnold. The average salary for a starting quarterback who isn't on a rookie contract, according to NFLPA data in 2024, was about 40.8 million per year. He is above average. At least he played above average last year. I know people are saying the Baker Mayfield range. That's, to me, if things don't go well. But if I represented him, I would be looking at, well, Daniel Jones got 40 million per year. I know it was his own team. Cousins off of an Achilles got 45. So I would be looking to try to get in the low 40s with good structure. Now, what you ask for and what you get can be 2 different things. Depends on what type of market you have. one thing that helps him is nobody's comparing this quarterback class to last year's. So you don't have a bunch of quarterbacks you would draft, although I suspect, as always, quarterbacks will get overdrafted and go in the first round when they shouldn't. He's the best quarterback available in free agency. For his best bet is for the Raiders, who have like 90 million in cap space, 95 million in cap space. They were making a play for Matthew Stafford, really want him. That would be his best case scenario. If he goes back to Minnesota, I know they didn't stick a franchise tag on him. That means the market probably was pretty soft, and he's going there knowing, well, I got one more year to try to make it be 2 years in a row I've played well, as opposed to being a one-hit wonder, than trying to hit it big next year.
Check him out on social media. He is the man at Corry Joel. Always love our conversations. Love seeing his posts on social media. Reading his stuff, by the way, over at cbssports.com. Does a terrific job. Thanks so much for the time, Joel. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ross.
As if I didn't love my dudes over at Labatt enough already, now they got this buy beer, get gear deal. You just head to the website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it instantly to rack up points for exclusive merch. Unbelievable stuff, by the way, that you can check out at rewards.labattusa.com. You get points for every purchase anywhere, any size, no matter what. Just take a picture of the receipt, go to rewards.labattusa.com to sign up. Buy beer, get gear.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the biggest news from yesterday, arguably, well, there's a lot of big news. The Eagles, they signed Zach Bond to a 3-year, $51 million deal with $34 million guaranteed.
Well, you can just see how much of a priority Zach was for them to do this 5 days before the legal negotiating period opens, a full week before the official start of free agency. So obviously this was something that the Eagles prioritized. I think there's a couple lessons here, right? Number one, you can keep the guys you really want to keep, right? You know, like the Eagles, they only have so much money. They'd love to keep Sweat or Milton Williams or whatever. They really wanted to keep Zach Bond. And so they are. I mean, that's basically my take on the salary cap for all teams. I said this on the Ross Report, which is the at Ross Tucker NFL social media only stuff that I do that's Eagles related. I can't remember another story like this. Guy plays 4 years for another team in one position, basically switches positions on a 1-year, very modest contract, and goes out and is all pro, first team, top 5 defensive player of the year voting. It's remarkable.
Couple of line news: the Chiefs, they trade Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears for a 2026 4th rounder, while the Browns left guard Joe Patino, he is returning for a 12th season in Cleveland.
Wow, that was a bad one. 12 years and you said Patino, like it's Rick Pitino. Batonio, Joel Batonio. Did you not know that?
It's March Madness. So Patino comes to mind. It's March now.
That hurts my heart that a guy that's been as good of a player for as long as he has as Joel Batonio, and you don't even know how to say his last name, and you're like a sports guy. He's been playing the NFL since you were 11 or 12. That's the life of an offensive lineman. As for Thuney, that's a big trade, man. I mean, first of all, love it from a Bears perspective because they need to try to maximize whatever they can get out of Caleb Williams. Thuney is versatile. Thuney is a pro. He never misses games. He'll show the young guys on the Bears offensive line how to do it. The fact that he can bump outside if you need him to in a pinch is gigantic. And they know the value of having a strong interior of the offensive line. A 4th round pick, not even this year, 2026 4th round pick. As for the Chiefs, they can't pay everybody. Right? They would love to keep Thuney, but he'd probably want a new deal, and he doesn't have any guaranteed money left. They weren't going to do that at his age, but they're worse. The Chiefs are clearly a worse football team as a result of doing this, but this is part of the issues that come with the salary cap era, especially if you're franchise tagging Trey Smith for $24 million. That takes up a lot of the cap.
Several other notes: the Raiders, they cut Gardner Minshew, they sign Alex Kappa, and make Maxx Crosby the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, while the Seahawks, they've released Tyler Lockett after 10 years, and they give DK Metcalf permission to seek a trade.
Well, that's interesting about Metcalf and permission to seek a trade. We'll see if that happens. As for the Raiders, they wanted to make a statement about Maxx Crosby being exactly what they want with the new regime. I feel like Maxx Crosby gets a new deal every year. Kudos to him. We talked about that with Joel. The Chargers released Joey Bosa. Sounds like he might team up with his brother in San Fran. Jags released Christian Kirk, and Bengals DN Sam Hubbard is retiring after the Bengals. We're going to move on from him. Before I forget, programming note, I'm on Dan Patrick's show tomorrow. I'm filling in the big chair for Dan Patrick tomorrow. So 9 a.m. to noon, if you want to check out your boy for 3 hours, or just check it out over the weekend. Always fun to go up there to Connecticut and be with the Danettes on that show. Huge fan of Smirnoff. Getting ready for this weekend. Couple of vodka Gatorades, vodka Pedialyte. Hydrate while I'm getting my vodka on. Big fan of the fact that it is $12.99. Are you kidding me? Why spend so much on more expensive vodka? That makes no sense. There's a reason why Smirnoff's the world's #1 vodka. You can get it without breaking the bank. It's called being Smirnoff extraordinary. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer and may vary by state. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. Smirnoff, we do game days. And Thursday night and Friday night and Saturday night, potentially too. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Huge fan in life of telling people how you feel about them, how much you care about them. I think myfrontpagestory.com might be the single best way to go about it. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.